Hi, everyone, and welcome to another session under our communication and industry skills sessions. This time, I have a very, very special guest with me. Someone I would not like to call a guest because he's family, but for the purpose of this session, he's a special guest. He's someone who's been associated with GMI also for a long time, a wonderful musician, composer, bass player, also now working in the music industry space and has worked with artists spanning from all genres, all seniorities, and fresh and styles, and someone who's as across the spectrum as much as I can think of someone. And please join me in welcoming Gaurav Balani here with us. Thank you so much, Gaurav, for coming here.
Thank you, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I will be so my ego is going to be swelling at the next family dinner.
Yes, Gaurav and I are related for those who may not have guessed it by our surnames. But so today's session, as I had shared with everybody, will be about how the aspect of communication dawns in when you are in a different setup as a musician or as an artist. It could be from the point of view of a band leader, it could be from the point of view of a band member, and how all those things kind of play when you are coming across and engaging with different sets of people. But before we get into that, I think it will be really, really nice to hear from Gaurav how his musical journey began and how did music come to him. So maybe you can
Oh,
start from the start, wherever on the start that may be.
I mean, to start from the start, obviously, Adi, being the ringleader of our gang, Aditya Valani, obviously, he was the one who picked up music in our household the first. And from there, it trickled down to Tarun and myself. And anything that, like he would, and since we're discussing this, Adi was like a big role in, like helping us get inspired by the instrument. And it wasn't just following him blindly, he also like helped us find our own voice, like Tarun with the drums and me with the bass eventually I think I was in 11th standard when he kind of, told me about Stuart Hammond. We would listen to the Crystal Planet album by Joe Satriani. So that's essentially where my roots began. And, constantly I've learned from Adi over the years. And I would say he was my first teacher, like, even if it wasn't officially, but yeah, that's how it started for me. And yeah, going for their gigs with Incognito wherever they were playing and trying to video record their shows, and that's essentially where my whole beginning of the music circuit, or the introduction rather, to the independent rock scene began. And college, 2006 is when I played my first competition on the same stage where I saw my cousins perform, Adi and Tarun both with their band. And that's all there was back then, right? Like there weren't any gigs happening. I mean, there would be one gig, and there were those big bands like Indian Ocean or Euphoria that be playing, and either you got to open for them, or it was like a competition where if you won the competition, you'd get to open for them at that particular competition. So I mean, yeah, just finding our way through those things. I played with the various bands back then. I would say 2009 is when I started seriously gigging, because I would say the industry was also sort of changing. There were a lot of pub gigs happening, which started, giving us more and more avenues to perform rather than just compete and be able to kind of make a little bit of money and, understand and navigate your way through the industry. So that's where it started for me. And yeah, like I also like immediately realized that we're in a country which speaks a different language than we perform. Like I mean, it was kind of like, I wouldn't say we were elitist about it, but like coming from that whole metal background, I was kind of averse to like performing in Hindi, which was the stupidest thing. But because we grew up listening to such amazing music in Hindi, so later we started seeing bands like Farid Code and so many other great bands doing that kind of music that you really loved and just singing it in Hindi. So we also kind of adapted that whole style and basically set up like a commercial project to be able to earn more money and play like the mainstream independent. I mean not independent but mainstream music. And with the help of that, I was able to go to Boston and save up enough money, learn over there, learn a lot more from Adi and Tarun over there as well. Like they really like those 2 months. In fact, like as much as I learned from Bruno Rayberg at Berklee, I learned from Adi and Tarun equally at home. So yeah, I mean, I would say again, my learning journey was like pretty much ongoing because of these factors. And once I came back, I got the opportunity to play with Parikrama, Shubhaji, uh, I was doing a lot more Bollywood sessions also. Aditi Singh Sharma's setup was also like, doing really well. And she had just basically sung quite a few popular tracks in Bollywood at the time. So that gave me a very good insight into the Bollywood industry as well. And that's essentially, where my whole thing started from. And I've been doing this since 2006 professionally.
Wow. So yeah, I that's incredible, and we're going to touch upon some of the things that he has been doing and the extent of it. But I think I'll go back on the time when Parikrama came in, because obviously that was one of the biggest. That is still it's one
Yeah.
of the legendary and the most iconic bands that India has had. And maybe you can talk a bit more about the time when it happened for you, and because and they were already established, and you had just how did that come about? Let's talk about that.
It was, as you rightly said, it was like one of the biggest breaks that I could have ever imagined in my life. Because I mean, obviously, right now, also like it's not like Parikrama isn't a big name. It's just that back then there were very few big names, to kind of sort of think about. Like there were very few bands, as I could think about in my youth, so to say. Damn, that there was only like Euphoria or Indian Ocean, or very few bands, that were like regarded as a legacy act. So Parikrama was definitely one of them. And when I got the call, I was obviously not prepared for what was gonna happen ahead. But I got a call to just do 2 gigs, which later I obviously realized were my audition gigs, and I went prepared obviously because I was super excited. And yeah, like those 2 gigs were like the audiences that I witnessed, and the kind of high that I would feel after performing for those kind of people. It was just a different thing altogether. So when that started, it was like at the time, Parikrama was, without exaggerating, playing about 10 to 15 shows every month, and in the season time, obviously. So
Wow.
like it was a lot of travel. It was a lot of new places, international travel also, obviously. So that was definitely a very exciting phase. And like right in the middle of that, Shubhaji's gig also happened. So it was kind of like being able to balance two really big names in their own respective fields. The good thing with Shubhaji's setup was that she was playing only a selective few concerts, so we were able to make, we weren't having as many date clashes, but they both happened simultaneously. I think a year apart, like after me getting the call for Parikrama, is when Shubhaji's gig also happened for both me and Adi, obviously. So that's essentially where, like that was definitely a very, very exciting phase, and a very much needed like boost for my career, I would say, because it helped me realize that I could do this, properly without having to think about another alternate career, so to say.
Yeah, I think that is somewhere sometimes musicians or artists kind of struggle that how am I going to make my ends meet? And especially if I'm a session musician, if I'm not
True.
composing to start with, or even if I'm composing, I'm not confident or ready enough to produce or come out with my music. Um, every time I have to look out for something. And like for you, I know for a fact that you had been playing around in the circuit without having any kind of qualms of what the kind of person is or music is, because for
Yeah.
you it was more about getting the experience and the exposure
Yeah.
of getting
True.
to do that variety. And I think that's where Parikrama also got to hear about you, and they got in touch with you, and that happened. And as I said, and were you one of the youngest members at that point of time in the band?
Yeah, just I mean, still am. No, not now. Right now, we have Shashank in the band as well. But yes,
Yes,
back then I was. Srijan was
yes,
like just I think 6, 7 months older than
similar.
me.
Yes,
But
yeah,
yes,
but one of
but
the yes.
technically the
So
youngest. Yes.
absolutely. So when and then another iconic person who got in touch with you and you started playing with was Shubhaji, as you rightly mentioned. Now, Shubhaji's music and obviously Parikrama's music are on different ends of the spectrum, if one was to categorize them. And when you are doing those things together, how would you approach those two projects, and how would you go about making your presence felt in each of them with your own individuality, while also contributing to the band's sound? Would you want to throw light on that, maybe one by one on both, because both of them have a separate sound altogether?
True, true,
Yeah,
true.
actually, sorry, I'm gonna butt in here, but just
It's a
add to that
familiar
question.
voice.
Oh yeah, familiar voice. So yeah, no, I just wanted to say that these were two setups, but he was playing a lot with a lot
I,
more setups as well. Like even at that time, you were also playing a lot with Aditi and a lot of other acts. Like I think at one point he was playing with 5 or 8 acts that
I'm
he
going to come
had.
to that. I am
Yeah,
going
and
to
then he
come.
was
I
just
know how his
That was a
Probably in
good
out of
time,
30
definitely.
days, he would be on road for 20 days or 25 days in a
Yeah.
month, which is a lot. Trust me, like, which is a lot for anyone to say, oh wow, what a life, but it's like a lot for anybody to be doing that kind
Yeah.
of
No, it
travel
was
or
a lot of
routine.
fun, honestly. Like, like, yes, it was like, something to, like, it was a lot to, it was kind of overwhelming at times because there's so many songs to be, remembering and thinking of. And that's when I started making notes of each and everything. It started when we were playing with Aditya Balani project, if you remember, like all the songs, and I was never used to like that kind of sound, like, or understanding like the bass could even play a melody, like in a song like Answers and all those things. Obviously, that's essentially what prepped me up for all these things. So Shubhaji Sarab, as you asked, like, was obviously a very different space. We were playing, it was essentially pop music. So in a, different, like a classical pop setting, but mostly on the pop side, very different from Parikrama. Same, like as Adi said, like, Aditi's setup, or I was even playing with Bandish at the time, which was also in the Bollywood space, but doing a little more, I would say, heavier version of the Bollywood, like repertoire. And yeah, I mean, every other setup that I got to play, I just learned a lot. Like, I've never learned jazz, I would say, but playing with Adi and Taran and both of their music, or even, doing those gigs with the trio setup where we learned like like standards like Watermelon Man, and everything else that I like played is what became my learning. So I kind of took it like that, and essentially it just helped me solidify, like, a big better understanding of how different music works, or how the bass works in these different settings. So I was very lucky to have this practical approach, towards these different genres of music.
So in the beginning, when you started with Parikrama, obviously their music was already created. Were you involved in the writing process at that point of time, or at that point of time it was more about the music that they had already created, they were playing that? How was that?
Initially, yes. We weren't, I mean, Parikrama itself wasn't very focused on writing music because, as I said, the band was on road 10 to 15 days every month, especially during the season. And the off season, like, was pretty much kind of like a relaxation space for everybody. But soon enough into, my time with the band, I would say like 3 years or 4 years on is when we started realizing that the touring can only get you so far. You need to start putting on music. There were other bands, at the time, much younger bands who had started releasing a lot of music and a lot of great music. So that did drive Parikrama also, and it did inspire the band as well to start writing music. So we did write a lot of music, and I would say Sonam Sherpa, he was like at the helm, and he was always writing, even if we weren't like putting it together as a band. But he was always writing music. Like, even now, we have like a hard disk full of all the riffs and all the motifs that he came up with. So yeah, I mean, that essentially. So basically, we started using the off season to start writing music, and I was hugely inspired by him. So we would sit together at his school many times and just compose tunes. In fact, we have a lot of songs that are coming up which we had written back then, because sadly we never got to complete them. So yeah, it was always a mutual process. It just depended upon who was writing the music. I would say I wasn't the most confident writer back then. I was still understanding what my sound is, so to say. So yeah, Sonanda would essentially initiate some risk, but there were a couple of songs which I felt confident enough to play to the guys, and they were very supportive. And we sat together in the jam room, completed them as a band, and they're yet to be put out. But yeah, we did write a lot of songs together, which we have been playing live as well.
Yeah. And how about the setup with Shubhaji? How would that work, and how would you contribute to how do you contribute to that project?
Honestly, in a band like Shubhaji, there was so much more learning for me than any other setup, I would say, because I had stalwarts like Adi and even Anil Chawla, the keyboard player, and of course, goes without saying, Shubhaji, and her husband Anishi, who's a fantastic tabla player, and Sudhirji on the harmonium. So there was just so much learning happening that I basically just had to follow these guys. Like, I mean, Adi and Anil, like, the way they would harmonically construct the music, because we wrote a lot of music with Koshish as well, which is Shubhaji Sarab. So I mean, for me, that's, as I said, like, wherever I knew I could learn something, I would try not to give in my inputs as much as possible, unless if I just wanted to try something out. So I pretty much took a backseat in terms of the composition space. There were a few things here and there that I would suggest, and Adi and Anil were like both very, like, kind to at least hear me out. No, I'm just joking. It was nothing like that. It was always a mutually, like, it was just kind of understood that they were leading the band, at least when it came to the composition aspect of it. along with Shubhaji, obviously. So mostly, like, when we would meet for jams, like Shubhaji would come with an idea. She had like pretty much the vocal melody and the lyrics set, and then we would just sit and essentially put together the harmonic element, behind all of that. And essentially, the arrangement aspect, I would say, is where we like I would get to contribute more than anything else. But composition wise, like I was really that involved in that setup because I was learning so much from what was already being done, and it was being done so beautifully that I didn't feel that it needed to be changed anyway.
So how would you prep for these kind of jams when you would happen? Because I know for each of these you would have a time fix that you will be meeting for rehearsals, the jam pad, be it for Parikrama and Shubhaji's, and I'll come to Aditi's setup also in a bit. But talking about these two first, what I would like to ask you, and that comes from the point of view of just to all the parties, people here who are there and they are here listening to you, as a person who, if not is coming directly in the space of co-writing, how would you prepare and be a part and make sure that you are doing your part? So how would you define would be a part for a person as a session musician out of in this?
Got it. I mean, as I said, like, it totally depended upon the gig. If it was Parikrama's gig, we had a set that we need to prepare for every gig. So I would make sure that there was Parikrama has a big repertoire too of songs. So I would make sure that, I'm preparing those particular tracks, and especially the ones that I was, finding the hardest to play or technically execute. So I would make sure that I would do my homework really well. When it came to Shubhaji setup, there was a lot of prep that went to the music theory side of things, because it also would venture into the classical side of things, which I had no idea about. So again, like, speaking to my band members, like Adi would really help me out. Anil would also really help me out because he was really good with that Indian classical knowledge. He knew a lot about those things. Obviously, Adi's also studied that side of things. So, even at jams, whatever they would teach me, even be at a different scale, which I had never heard. So I would learn that, basically share on that for a while before we're meeting, and especially closer to the jams. And when it came to the scheduling aspect of the jam, I had to obviously make sure, or jams or gigs for that matter, I had to just make sure that everything was being done properly, so that I don't end up double booking, because that happens a lot. And if I'm not available for a date, I would make sure that somebody else was available who could do the job. To just be there for the band, so that the band isn't professionally kind of left in the lurch.
No, that's a good point, because I think especially when you're a session musician or someone who's coming in to perform a particular task, let's say, and then if you're doing that for multiple projects, there could obviously come a point where the schedules might clash.
Definitely,
And
yeah.
while the onus, the final decision would obviously be at the person who is owning the project to decide. But would it always be, you would always recommend or put out a person as an alternative for you so that they have an option available at least from your side?
Yeah, it was preferable, right? Because nobody wants to kind of go through the headache, especially bands like, Shivaji's Parikrama or even Aditi. I mean, they were like traveling so much that, nobody would really have time, or still doesn't have time to sit and jam with a new person. So one thing I would make sure I always have a hard disk full of all the bass parts and, all the song recordings and the charts written down, so that even if there was like a gig that would come down like the last minute, which has happened, by the way, with even with Parikrama, even with Aditi. In fact, Aditi, on the day of the gig, I remember having to, send somebody as a sub because of various reasons, like, I mean, obviously health reasons or whatever it is that would come up. And yeah, I would make sure of that I would be the ones prepping them up. Obviously, like, it's not like the band jam wouldn't happen, but it would essentially be like the final thing. But before that, everything else, all the homework should have been done, so that the band essentially goes to the least amount of stress when it comes to the show aspect of it. And I was very lucky to have found some very amazing bass players who would, like, help me out in these situations. And I mean, there was some seasons that the sub musician was playing a lot more than me in those particular setups, as has happened with me also when I'm subbing for my friends in their setups. So yeah, I mean, if you do that, it essentially ensures more work coming your way, because more than the skill set is also the reliability that that people can have on you, that they know that this person will come prepared and they will pull off. I mean, if not better, then at least as good as our permanent member who's there. So that's what I would strive for when I would try to get a sub who would come to play in place of me, and hopefully it doesn't play better, because then my job's not just joking. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think there are one thing that always is there is that there are lot less bass players, good bass players available. So there's always a shortage of being able to find someone who you can rely. So obviously, having few is always good to have in your
Yeah,
kitty,
there was a point where that was true, but right now it's not the case. The
which
competition
is
is
true.
fierce, and there's such amazing bass player that it scares me. And it's actually a good thing because I think I'm practicing the most right now in my career than I ever did, because it's so inspiring to see these young kids who can play stuff that I would, like, not even listen to, just out of fear, anxiety that I will never be able to play it. I don't even want to listen to it. So it's quite amazing to see that talent, and kids 18, 19 and shedding like even nobody's business. So it's just very
We have a lot of
inspiring to see.
18, 19-year-olds, by the way, in our house
Yeah,
right
that's what
now.
I was
Okay.
talking about. All
In-
your, that's what I'm exactly what I'm saying. Like, please keep your cameras off. I don't want to be intimidated by you guys. And I'm just joking. But yeah, no,
Maybe
it's
now we
very
can
inspiring.
talk about your projects with Aditi, more on the Bollywood side, and even Jubin Nautiyal that you have played. That you want to share some experiences with those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Aditi set up, since, obviously I had mentioned that we had a band together in college, which gradually turned into a Bollywood setup because, we were anyway playing a lot of corporate and commercial shows. It's just that playing Bollywood music just gave us an exposure to a bigger and a much wider audience, and many more shows started coming our way. And then when Aditi sang, her first song was in Devti, and post which Dhoom happened for, title track for Dhoom 2 happened, which again put her on a different level, I would say, like, for the lack of a better term. Like, it just helped us gig a lot more with that setup. So that setup gradually dissolved into, being called Aditi Singh Sharma. So that was a lot of fun because, I mean, for me, I was experiencing a different side of the industry and also handling different artists, because essentially the band was full of session artists in the band. So it was obviously Aditi's setup, but then somebody has to handle, the logistical aspect of how things are being run, sending across a set list to everybody, making sure, almost like a managerial aspect, I would say. So that was a very, very different side of things, which really taught me a lot on how to, kind of understand different dynamics. And there were so many times that we'd have to get session players, and they were session players from Bombay, people who I had never even met or known. So, making sure how I gel well with them. There were a lot of these weird instances that helped me, taught me a lot better on how to, communicate with people from, like, totally different space altogether, who you've never met, never communicated with. So that was a lot of fun. Artists like Juban, Gajendra Verma, Ash King, I mean, so many Bollywood artists I've been lucky enough to play for. But those are essentially, again, subbing for my friends who are playing in these bands, as I was mentioning. In fact, last season, like, I would say October, November, December, I subbed for my friend so much in his setup, Gajendra Verma setup, that he wasn't there for, I would say, more than 1 or 2 gigs. So those kind of settings also happen. But then again, it's a subbing gig. You know what you need to do. Obviously, you need to go prepared. And there are some setups which don't like to have, like, everything ready in place when it comes to the recordings and be it the chart. So you need to do that extra effort to make sure that that's done. So that is the only taxing or the, challenging part, I would say, when it comes to preparing for a session. But otherwise, it's, I mean, it's still playing music, at the end of it, and playing for a different audience that you wouldn't really get to experience, playing where you play. So yeah, I mean, I thoroughly enjoy playing in all these setups as well, because the audience is so huge and the market for this music is insane that, you can't imagine the kind of fan following that these people have. And it's just to be a tiny part of it for that, for that amount of time during the show, it's a different energy altogether that you experience.
So, what's been one of the biggest spaces that you have ever played to? Like, do you remember any specific? I know you play for mostly ironically, the kind of setups that you're part of, all of them are big, huge setups, like be it a Parikrama show or a Shubhaji show or even Aditi's or any of those shows. But one of the biggest one that you remember, do you remember any one of that kind?
I mean, there would, yeah, I've been very lucky. There are a few, I would say. There, on my show with Parikrama, I remember when we played the Hornbill Festival. I mean, the audience was insane. I remember Aditi's show where we played at the World Trade Center in Dubai. Again, like a massive audience. Another show with Juban Nautiyal, it was somewhere in West Bengal. I mean, people were like jumping on top of each other, and it was like a sea of people who were just there to see him. And I don't think the PA could even reach back there because he kept saying that, I just remember this one line. He kept saying, "Vyavastha bana ke rakhiye," like, just stay calm. And nobody could hear him. They were throwing chairs in the air. They were just excited to be in that space. So that frenzy, all, I mean, I don't want to use the word Beatlemania and kind of demean it because I was secret, but it was insane to like witness all those things. So I mean, most of the time when you do a public concert with these Bollywood artists, especially in a big space and a small town, I mean, I would say I've noticed that people just go really, really insane. And yeah, it's been quite a few. And even Shubhaji's Esplanade Theatre, that was like a very surreal experience because it was like a proper theater in Singapore, and you were there obviously. Like, we had gone for the show together, and it was a beautiful experience. I remember like playing for that audience and in that setting.
Yeah,
So I
that
had
was one of
quite
the
a
most
few.
beautiful ones that I had seen in a
Yeah.
while. Yes, absolutely. And even I think there was one festival, was it in Bihar or
Oh yeah, Bihar Mahotsav. Yes,
that was also one of the
absolutely.
photos that I had seen was I had not seen so
Yeah,
many people, unlike in a political rally.
absolutely.
that that was a huge
There was
one
a
that I
proper
had seen.
security check that happened while we were at soundcheck. Adi would remember, and I remember being referred to as Bass Father Gaurav Balani at that show. First time I'd heard that term, but it was quite interesting.
So how is it different on playing such huge stages? Like one of the things that happens is that yes, when you are rehearsing or jamming, you're probably in a 8 by 10 or 15 by 12 kind of room, or maybe a little bigger. But then when the scale that you play at, it obviously has a bearing on the kind of sound that would come up to you through monitors or is going out through the PA. Initially when you started, or maybe you can talk about how do you feel the difference, and how can one adjust to that kind of system, sound, because I know you can be a great player, but sometimes being on such a huge stage can really throw you off at times and
Absolutely.
not be
Yeah.
on your game. So maybe you can share something about that.
Honestly, for me, that first experience happened when I played IIT Delhi finals. When my band back then, we got through the finals, and we were like really, really excited that we're finally getting to play a big stage. It was the IIT amphitheater. It's everybody's like anybody from the Delhi scene back then would have like it was kind of like the mecca that you have to perform there. That and Hamsadani Theater. So I remember getting there, but as soon as I stepped on stage, my heart started beating so fast because again, like rows and rows of people, and I mean, I just couldn't imagine that, like, I mean, I'm playing the same music which I was playing just the other day for like 20, 30 people, like in a small environment. Now that we qualified, we have to play for these thousands of people. So it was a totally different space altogether. But for me, I would just say it just came with time and, like just getting used to it. Like now, luckily, that doesn't happen. You don't get those jitters. Like there's a different kind of excitement that you feel when you go on stage, but you're not like nervous, or there isn't that sort of anxiety that you feel that, oh my God, am I going to be able to perform like this? Like what if I mess up? I mean, all those things essentially just with time, you just ease into that. And it's everybody has their own process, right? Like my way was like just to kind of maybe after a few songs we warmed up, and I was luckily playing with my friends, like they were my college friends, and I pretty much grown up with one of them. So the comfort that you have with the band members also translates into your performance. And that's the case now as well, because, all these setups that you get to play with, all these big spaces that you play at, you're essentially communicating with your band members musically, obviously, and that comfort level translates into your playing and your presence on stage. And I think it just becomes a natural progression. The more and more you play, the more comfortable you get with these situations yourself. So yeah, for me,
Yes,
that's how it happened.
nice. I think before I'm going to get to the next stage of which was writing your own music, we have a question from Ashwin, sorry. He said that he wants to ask you if you had any bandwidth to improvise at live gigs, or was everything according to the charts?
Oh yes, of course. There was a lot of bandwidth to improvise on stage, but it depended upon which setup, like and what parts, obviously. So with Parikrama, there are like obviously the structures. The show is fixed in a way. Like there's a show flow that happens. The lighting, the light engineer, everybody's kind of working on like particular set list that we're following. Same with Adati for that matter. But there would be those segments, like even in a song like Dhoom in Adati's setup, there's like a bass solo that happens. So that's obviously like you improvise, you do your thing. It's a slap based solo which I choose to do every time, but yeah, it's my space to kind of go into that segment and improvise. With Parikrama also, there are a few songs which like segments for like drum solo, guitar solos, obviously even bass solo for that matter. So in those spaces, yes. But I haven't really played with a lot of setups. I mean, yes, there have been bands. I was lucky enough to play with Adil Vasundhara at one point, and half of their set was improvisation. Like you're just like you're following the set list, but pretty much everything else that you're doing is just like playing in the moment and, like reacting to what everybody else is doing. Same the trio that I had with Adi also, we were called the Commons, I remember, and we were playing jazz standards like for as many, hours as possible at that residency that we had. And pretty much all of it was improvisation. You're following a chart, but then when you're soloing and, doing your other thing, you are like pretty much improvising on that set as well. So it totally depended upon what set I was playing and what the setting was and what part of the show we were at.
Great. So moving on to the another big phase, which came in officially in 2020 when you released your own album. And I know that it had been in the making for a while. Maybe you may want to, you can share a bit more about when did the writing start, or how long had you been writing, and how did the final decision to release your music came through?
Oh yeah, that was definitely a big turning point, and I had been writing for a very, very long time. And like, I mean, playing with musicians as talented as Adi, Tarun, Sohail, Nipun, all these guys. Like, I was learning a lot. Even like, the other side, Parikrama happened a little later, but I would say my learning began much earlier. So there were a lot of tunes that, or melodies or ideas, whatever it would be, like, I would just keep writing, and a lot of that started happening after Boston, because that's where I really learned, like, to imagine bass as a bigger instrument than just, playing a groove or, a bass line, so to say. So like Bruno and Adi really helped me understand harmonically what all can be done as a musician, not, I mean, obviously playing bass is a big responsibility, but if you're composing, you have to start thinking as, another instrumentalist as well. So I would say 2011 onwards is when I started writing and, putting away like a bank of music right after Boston. And up until 2016, it had accumulated into quite a sizable amount of songs, and which I didn't have an outlet for. I was playing certain songs in certain setups, but none of those outfits, I would say, had the kind of sound that I was wanting to put out, with my own particular imaginary whatever setup in my head. So that's why In a Lab happened for me, and 2016 is when I started, I decided to start putting on my own music. And it started off with a few singles every year, and it gained momentum, luckily, because even though it was an independent setup, whatever response I would get was very overwhelming, was very important for me, because it helped me drive myself a little more, because it was essentially me who was doing everything, collaborating with various artists, but I had to keep driving the setup because it was like a solo setup at that point. And 2018 is when it started playing live, because I was getting a little saturated by just putting the music out. So we started playing live, and when it became into this band setting, I had such great artists that I was playing with and sharing the stage with, that all the songs that had been written were getting pushed in these different directions. And everybody was interpreting the songs in their own ways, making them their own, and so many parts were being composed which were not similar to what I had written while I was composing them. So it just started becoming more and more exciting for me. So I spoke to the band. I told them about this idea that In a Lab has always been collaborating with various artists for music that we've released. How about we release music as a band for the first time, and you guys be the featured artists, because even though the songs have been written pretty much like over the years, but you guys have added your parts. And there was some song that say Shruti had written a vocal line for, or even lyrics for that matter. So I changed the drum parts around. Obviously, I'm not a keyboard player, so whatever I had programmed had limitations. But Archit came and he would play like these beautiful like versions of those particular things, or even adding parts to it. Obviously, same as Shashank on the flute, and he was using the flute as a synth, almost like in playing all these amazing lines using like a vocal processor on the flute. So it was becoming very interesting for me to like kind of hear that sound. So I decided to put that out as with the band, and we worked really hard all of 2019. And the album was ready and it was supposed to be put out, but we sadly lost Sonamda right around that time, so it had to be postponed. And finally, when we decided to put it out, the pandemic decided to come our way and take over all our lives. So, but we still decided that we're going to put it out, and regardless of whatever happens, we just want the music to be out there. So that's essentially how 2016 onwards we put out the music, and 2020 is when we put the EP out, debut EP.
How was it being on the other side and leading a band?
Uh, Honestly, it wasn't. It's been a mixed bag. Like, to be honest, because there's so many more responsibilities. Like, even though I have handled the logistical aspect when it came to Aditi's setup, I have enjoyed doing that. But this was like everything was on you. Like, not only did you have to coordinate with everybody, you were also financially responsible for everything that was happening. You were also responsible for telling everybody about everything that was happening, because this was a band that you were leading, but they weren't expecting finances from you, but they still needed financial clarity. So that was just one aspect, but a very important aspect, because when an artist is giving you their time, firstly, you can't put any, I don't think you can put anybody's art, categorize it in terms of like financial, like, aspect, or like kind of like a tangible commodity. So for me, that whole aspect of them giving me their time, or even creativity for that matter, was very, very important. So I wanted to make sure that they knew what my plan was, and how I wanted to kind of see this through, and still do at this point. So it was a little tough, and I'm still learning. I've obviously made mistakes. I've obviously uh, probably like try to do certain things in a certain way which may not have vibed with a certain band member. But then you learn on the job, so to say, because it's not a conventional industry. Also, it's not a conventional setting. It's not a conventional workspace that these are the fixed designated hours. This is when you work. This is when you don't work, and so everything just kind of happened on the fly, and it was definitely a very, very good learning experience, because it made me realize so many things about different band members, different dynamics, and playing on people's strengths, as opposed to getting them to figure out skill sets which they probably aren't wired to work well with. So it's been a mixed bag, but a lot of fun and very, very humbling experience, so to say.
Wonderful. So now, are you looking at coming out with more music in the setup or different setup? What's next for you?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, as I said, like I've been writing a lot of music all through the pandemic. I was very lucky that for some reason, all the years, all the inspiration kind of struck me right then. So 2020 and 21, I wrote a lot of music, and we're planning to release our next EP at the end of the year, which we're just in the process of recording. And I also was writing some very different kind of electronica music, which didn't really fit into Inner Lab, even though Inner Lab is a band that does various genres. But this particular thing felt like it needed to be something more different than what we're already doing with this band. It's not even a band sound, so to say. So to be fair to the guys, and not, I mean, have them in the band and not be involved in the recording or the composition process. So I decided that I'll essentially do a different setup, and Inner Lab can do its own thing, which obviously involves the band in its capacity, songwriting, producing, composing, everything that we do together. So right now, yes, we're in the process of releasing both the albums, one within a lab, one with the other setup, and
Wonderful.
that's
Wow.
both gonna
Mhm.
happen this year itself.
Wow. So having started writing in 2011, now finally sees you coming out in different capacities and different roles. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yes.
Great. Another hat that you have recently donned is now working on the music business side of things, which is primarily actually more specifically on the A&R part. So maybe you can talk a bit more about that role that has come
Yeah,
along.
absolutely. That's kept things very exciting for me, because all through the pandemic, I was looking for something which had a bit more structure than what I was doing, because I was always a person kind of putting structure to, like how I wanted to see things in the future, and I really enjoyed doing that. But obviously, as a person, you have your own limitations. Also, there will be days that you don't feel like doing anything, and since you're only answerable to yourself, you wouldn't do it, and which I felt was a bit of a drawback, and I was kind of slacking some days, and it's okay to do that. But when I got in touch with Harsh and Yogi, from Dibble, and when I found out that they were looking for somebody to represent them as an A&R, representative, I was very excited to hear what they had in mind, and I obviously had a look at the website, and Dibble was doing some incredible stuff, what they were trying to put together with this whole catalog of South Asian soundscape, to not only obviously level the playing field here in India, but also to take the catalog to the international audience, where not only are the finances on a different scale, but also the representation for the kind of music that's happening, which is so exotic and so unique to its nature. It's not been represented properly. So when I found out about this idea, and when I heard from these guys, and when I met them more than anything, is when I was just so convinced that I really, really wanted to be a part of it. And luckily it all worked out with us. And it's been since November, I would say, officially, that I've been associated with Dibble, and it's been a lot of fun. Honestly, there's a lot of learning for me, as and speaking to a lot of artists, hearing a lot of music which is so amazing and so uh, out there, that I never imagined would be happening in India. So it's been a really, really good learning experience for me on this side of things, and speaking to artists and understanding where they kind of see their vision. It's been very inspiring, to say the least.
Yeah, I know. And we were talking about it, how The space of sync licensing is growing by the day, and with
Absolutely.
with the influx of so much content creation that's happening across
Absolutely.
different platforms, that's become a major avenue for musicians and artists to explore how to put out their music and how to reach out to the audiences from the non-conventional routes and getting it heard
Absolutely.
on the scale which could be different.
Absolutely. And there's no structure to this industry, which is what I really, really like about Devil, because they're trying to bring that structure about. And as I said, like, level the playing field. It's not like you don't have to rely upon, word of mouth to get your music heard. It's simply on the basis of merit, and, like, and obviously the quality of music that's being put out there. It's so huge that, it needs to be heard by all these people. And honestly speaking, that side of the industry is a little saturated too, as we've seen, the kind of artists that are being picked for all these shows, be it a show as mainstream on the OTT platform as Bombay Begum, is still going for artists like Ches and Soulmate and so many other independent artists, So it's very, very nice to see that change come about. And it's not just the standard, household names as the big industry composers. And no disrespect to them, they're doing great work, but this is a different side. And I mean, this is giving an equal opportunity to everybody just to be heard, and on the basis of the merit is where the music gets picked and placed. And it's definitely an industry which is going to grow by leaps and bounds in the coming, few months as well.
Amazing. Uh, it's been interesting hearing you, Gaurav, because from the point of starting to just pick up an instrument, to become being just an instrument player, to becoming a session musician, to becoming a band member, to becoming a lead contributor, composer, managing stuff, and then touring, and then getting onto the now commercial side of things at ARR, the kind of space of this industry. And more than that, I feel very rarely does one engage in such different musical outfits. And probably, I think back in the days, I feel when touring was at its peak and things were what we call as a pre-pandemic time, you would probably you
PC,
would
yes.
probably have, yeah, we'll have different concepts of BCs and ADs now. You would be playing different music maybe in the same day. Maybe sometimes you'll have gigs in the same day playing different style of music, and you have to switch gears. So would that had become, I know it comes through routine and comes through having been a part of it, but did it sometimes get to you? And did it used to sometimes get overwhelming also?
It wasn't so much so playing different kinds of music or the, the kind of scheduling that was. It was just the sleeplessness. I'm very, stuck on one point that if I don't get enough sleep, I just get very cranky. Like the world seemed like a different place. I don't feel like I belong anywhere. So it was just the sleeplessness. And luckily, again, I'm very good with, sleeping anywhere. I would like pass out at sound checks, after sound checks, obviously not while I had to play, but I
But
would
I
try
think that's
to.
also something you kind of had to make yourself do, right? Because you
Yeah,
have no
I
choice.
mean, absolutely. But there are some friends of mine who I know who I've toured with who just cannot pass out anywhere. They can't even sleep when the lights are on. They can't sleep when, like if it's the bus is moving, or if we were traveling by like a train to Chandigarh, I remember. And Jimmy, a guitar player with Aditi's band, if you remember him, he was like, the train was moving the other way and our seats were facing the other way. He's like,
Facing.
dude, I can't sleep. I'm like, what happened? He's like, the train is going the other way. And I was like, and I could, it's sad, but like some people are wired a certain way, but I mean, you can't help it. So I've been very lucky that it's just like if you're sleepy, I would just be able to pass out and, not have to worry about anything. So yeah, but in terms of the musical aspect, yes, when it would be hectic, like you would have to put in that extra effort to make sure that you're remembering your parts and everything. Because say someday I'm playing with Aditi, and then in the evening I have a different set, and both of them are equally important, not in terms of just playing the bass, but also handling other aspects. Those would get a little hectic, and I would make sure that I had my checklist in place. Like with Aditi setup, I need to have my sound card in place, all the cables and the backup cables. In fact, if one happens to give me trouble, which has happened in place, I've even forgotten cables at times, my backup and my permanent cables. So as soon as I would land, I would start calling up in a frenzy to all my friends that I need this cable. Do you have an RCA to EP cable? I need this, whatever. Like I would just make sure that everything was done. So yeah, you do drop the ball at times. You're only human. That's bound to happen, and I have done that, obviously. And I hope I don't do that as often as I've done it in the past. But yeah, I mean, I've always pretty much been on top of things, just because I've tried to make sure that everything's in place and all my notes and checklist is in point.
No, I think it's a very important point somewhere that we kind of forget. Uh, your craft as an artist or a musician is obviously very important, but who you are and how you conduct and how you be in a environment also has a lot to do with whether you may have got an opportunity, but would that opportunity continue for you, if it come
Yeah,
around for you, would all depend upon your attitude and what you bring your gain as. So
true.
you may be a very great performer, but if you've not had that attitude, you may not get those opportunities. And sometimes we feel that, that is, I have it, and so it's okay. But
Absolutely.
yeah, and I have seen that happen with so many people. And one of the main things, I think, where you have managed to get so many people come to you and being asked to even sub for them, is because they, as you rightly said, the reliability factor, they know that. And the reliability is not just from the point of view of uh, being there, obviously being able to do your job, what you're required to do, and doing it in a manner which is professional. The definition of professionalism obviously
Yeah.
varies,
Very. Yeah.
but I think there's a basic denominator that flows in, which everybody needs to be very conscious of, which comes in with how you
True.
conduct yourself.
Absolutely. No, I was, as you said, like, all these setups, like they happened, like they did happen. I was very lucky, but I like held on to them very dearly because I knew how lucky I was. Like these opportunities don't come to everybody. And I mean, there are so many more talented musicians, not just bass players out there, who I know would probably wouldn't have gotten half the opportunities that I did. And I was always aware of that aspect. So whenever an opportunity came, as big or as small, I would like, try to weigh it out, how much it meant to me. And like if it didn't mean as much to me, I wouldn't take it up. But if it did, and if I took it on, I would make sure that I would give it my 100%. I mean, even on my bad days, I was still like, on my game to make sure that I'm not being that sullen person that people don't like being around. And one other thing is, when you're traveling with a band, you're only on stage for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. But apart from that, you're traveling with them, you are, yourself, the artist aspect of you is not there. So you want to make sure that part of yourself is also, like somebody that people can tolerate. It's not just, they're not there with you to, be able to just be able to play with you. So all those things were something, that. And I've always made a conscious fact of that, because you want the environment to be fun, and it's a collaborative space. You want everybody to be happy, because it translates into the music that you perform on stage. So all those things, I definitely was very lucky enough to learn on the road, and being in setups which was making so much money, but the musicians couldn't stand to be around each other. Like they would just like look at the clock, that when it's, the 3 hours of the jam are up, we just want to run out. As opposed to, in setups where there was no money and people were still like just happy playing, and as long as the jam was getting extended. So I wanted to obviously choose the latter, because obviously the mental health aspect of it, and just being happy and creatively liberated is very, very important when you work in a musical space.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great point, because that's something that sometimes we forget, and how both of them go hand in hand. You have to work on your craft for sure, but you equally important is how you are and who you are being. That's also like something that's very, very crucial. It's been wow. I can go on and on, but I think I'll open up the space for everybody else also, in case anybody has any questions, anything they would like to know more from Gaurav about the tons of projects that he does and people that he plays with, or any kind of stories. Trust me, offline the days can go by and the stories won't stop. There are so many stories that come out of the shows that they play. This is the time for anyone who may want to ask for any questions. Anybody?
I think everybody's aware that I have very bad jokes, and they don't want to get into that aspect.
No. Chari, you can come on screen and ask. Oh, Chari wants to know if you can talk a little
Oh.
bit more about. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Chari.
Hi, Gaurav. How
Hi
are you doing?
Charita, how are you?
I'm good. It's nice to see you again.
I know, same here.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more about Dibble. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I was actually just going through the website where you spoke about it,
Awesome. What do you think
and
of it?
it's really cool. It's very
Yeah,
detailed, but I think
awesome.
it'll be very beneficial for some of the GMI kids to know more about it as well.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I mean, we should like do another whole session on Dibble. I
Yes,
would love to do that as
yes,
well.
we
But
spoke about it.
yeah, exactly. So it's essentially a sync licensing firm, as you could see from the website. It's designed for filmmakers and media houses from around the world who can come onto the website and get the music that they're looking for their particular project, based upon the attributes, the genres. I mean, there are various permutations and combinations that you can enter and find the exact kind of music that you're looking for through a catalog of music that's already been put together and uploaded onto the platform. And we're essentially doing this to not just put the music out there for the Indian industry in one place, wherein everybody can essentially come and check out exactly what they're looking for, but also take this soundscape to the international, industry where the representation hasn't been the best. I mean, in terms of our, South Asian soundscape. So that's essentially what Devil is trying to do. And if you like the website, like Harsh and Yogi are, the founding members. I think Harsh is on the talk here as well, and all the credit goes to them. They've been putting together this huge knowledge repository, which is all mentioned on the website. So even artists who aren't working with Devil or in general, like there's so much information that they've collected and learned on their own, in this whole industry, which technically they're not from. They just got intrigued by this whole vacuum, when it comes to a sync licensing space, and they put this together within, I would say, a year and a half time, and they're working day and night to get this going, and we're going live end of March or early April. And yeah, it's been a lot of it's just a different side of the industry which I haven't experienced, and there's a lot of learning happening. So we should do like a detailed session, and I can get into like we can even have Harsh and Yogi in that session and
Yeah.
get like all the aspects of Dipple out there, because they have like a really, really good vision, and there's a lot of things that they've planned with this thing that's going to be launching very soon.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah, next
you.
term, one of the music business forums can be about
Yeah,
sync
absolutely.
licensing.
Absolutely, that would be amazing.
Great. Anybody else has any other question? Would love to anything ask? The idea, of course, as I told you earlier, everybody, that was just to hear from an artist who's played across so many projects of different styles, people, and interact with different kinds of people on a daily basis. How one may, has managed to maintain their identity, not and still be a part of different projects at the same time. That's a very it's easier said than done. Right now I'm going to play Parikrama, tomorrow I have a gig with jam with Shubhaji, next I have Aditi. Yeah, it sounds so cool, but it takes a lot of mindset and a shift and preparation when you're going for such projects. And I'm just talking about three right now. I know he does, as Adi was mentioning in the earlier part, he would do 5 or 6 at one point of time. And so how do you maintain yourself to make sure that you are present in your capacity to be there for the project that you're part of? Because once you have entered the door and being in a jam room with Parikrama, then it doesn't matter whether you were with Shubhaji 5 minutes back or with Aditi 10 minutes back. You are here in your capacity to be with Parikrama. So you have to be in that role. And to maintain that and that kind of consistency and discipline and sincerity and commitment needs a lot of, goes a lot. And to be able to maintain that kind of rapport, having been worked for these people with these people, Parikrama with like what, 10 years plus now?
11 years
Almost
plus, yeah.
11, yeah. So like, being around and being with them. And see, it's not just about convenience. A band stays together also because it's working. And
Yeah.
because we know bands break because of things not working out, falling out happens. But it's also about how you have managed to maintain those kind of relationships on and off the stage that Gaurav was talking about, which becomes a very crucial part of what you bring
Absolutely.
with you and how you carry yourself forward when you go out. So it's a classic example where you are known for your individuality. Even it's only now that he has started putting out his music, and before that, as now we now know him as his his own sound as in a lab. But then before that, everything was in different sounds. But still, Gaurav Balani had existed at Gaurav Balani also. So for that to be maintained is something where I wanted to bring this upon, because every people here who are there as students wanting to go out, you will get opportunities to write your music, to produce your music, but at the same time you will be playing or producing for different artists, and how do you kind of maintain that kind of balance, and how do you kind of bring yourself out there is something that one needs to really focus on and think about when you go there and work with people, because this industry, and Gaurav can really vouch for it, works on relations, how you have managed to
Absolutely.
keep your
Yeah.
equations.
Absolutely agree on that. That's yeah, you just said everything properly. I can't add anything to that.
Shrishti had something to say. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick. Hi, Gaurav. I
Hi,
just had a
Shishini,
quick
how are you?
question. Good. How are you?
Fine.
So I wanted to ask you. So since you've also worked as a session musician, and so how do you differentiate between a contribution and where your own IP comes in? So is it usually defined in a band setting beforehand, or is it something you figured out along the way, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's very interesting that you said that, because that's not defined in India, sadly, and it should be, because when it comes to IPs and when you're contributing something creatively, like those things need to be spoken about, because very soon these things can. I mean, these are the things that turn into legal battles in the bigger when stakes are like higher, so to say. But when it's come to me, like there have been situations which have turned a little ugly, wherein I have been a part of a composition and I wasn't told, and the song was released without even me being told about it. And yeah, it's happened, and you try to communicate that later on, or you learn from those experiences that when you are contributing to something, especially in the capacity as a composer, or when your IP is involved, as you said, you want to make sure that you have that communication even if the other person is not willing to do it. And that's one thing that I wanted to like always be really really wary of when it came to inner lab, because I was working with people who weren't they weren't session artists, they were my band. When it came to session artists, of course, it was always spoken about whatever they were comfortable with. Sometimes people are just comfortable working on a co-composition thing, and because they're writing with you. But sometimes, even as a featured artist who wants to write with you, wants to take a session fee, so you speak to them, figure it out with them. And it is high time that we bring that change about, because it's more professional. It doesn't leave room for this discrepancy, that what happens tomorrow if the song becomes huge, or whatever it is that you work on. So it's a very healthy practice to have, and I'm so glad that you even thought about something like this, because it's so important to bring that change about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trishti. Yes, that's something that all our music business students have been made to start thinking about, and that's something that
Absolutely.
both of you said is very, very
Yeah,
important.
split sheets, all these things aren't a concept in India, but they should be, because like everybody's working hard. Even if you're not, say, in a lab technically is associated with me, but I have I'm working with such amazing artists like Shruti Daswana is a singer with the band, and there are songs that I had written before, but she would come and even if it was like one line that she's written, she still gets composition credit, and it's not something she has to ask me for or tell me or remind me of. And same with me, there are songs that she has written the lyrics for, but I have also contributed a few lines, but still it does count for composition credit. I mean, these are things that are just, I mean, healthy practices to discuss, as you rightly pointed out, and it should happen for sure. For sure.
And I think that's where slowly the idea of having lawyers and getting into
Yeah.
contracts is something that becomes more important. And the idea that you would need lawyers only when you have issues, that kind of
Yeah.
mindset needs to go away, and that is something that needs to change. These are always things that are always helpful to have a clean lines about when you're going into a creative space. I think that's changing, that slowly one can see that those
Yeah.
changes are coming through. You see those things getting through, and quite a few of you actually are going to get going to start having this talk spoken about and talked more in your upcoming terms music business
Yeah.
sessions, and some of you have already been through it. So
No,
yeah,
it's-
those things are changing, as Gaurav said, but as you said, it's not as structured industry, unfortunately. Fortunately, it's changing, it's moving, it's moving towards that. Now how fast or slow that pace is, that's for us to determine, because at the end of the day we are
True.
the people who are going to be joining this industry as
Absolutely.
artists. So we are the ones who become, as much as you may not like the word, change makers. So you
No,
will be
but
the
it's
ones who would
true. Yeah.
drive this. Yes, so it's something that all of
True.
us take that onus. Can't wait for a third person to start this.
Absolutely. Like some industries, it's clearly demarcated. Like even with Dibble, as Charita had asked earlier, like when we have the artists upload their music, there's a click wrap agreement that the artist essentially sends to the contributors, be it a performer, be it a co-composer. Everybody needs to be given that credit. So legally, you're indemnifying yourself also. It's not just a way of acknowledging anybody else's credit to the song, but you're also indemnifying yourself that in case of any legal discrepancy that may arise in the future, you've asked permission from the contributor or the performer that that this is what you contributed, and are you okay with me doing this? So it's as simple as that, but these practices need to happen, and it's something I'm learning so much about, like right now in my 30s, when it's come to working with a company, when it's come to sync licensing. And it's so important to have these things spoken and clearly demarcated, because I mean, legal lawsuits like can happen at the drop of a hat if you don't know what your contributions are, or whose music you was taken without permission. So it's a very important aspect, and I'm so glad that this change is coming up, but it will happen because this industry needs it. So yeah.
We have a very interesting question. How do you take care of your physical and mental health and diet and maintain a
Oh,
healthy lifestyle when you're on a tour, especially?
oh, is that a friend of mine who's asking? No.
Abhishek Bindal.
Okay. Hi, Abhishek. Thanks for asking that. That's such an important question. Honestly, diet-wise, yes. Like, I mean, initially when I started traveling, like I didn't take much care about this aspect because I was traveling, I was in different hotels and, eating like exposed to different cuisines even around the world. So I was just this excited little kid, when I was traveling because I love food. But obviously, when you realize that this is all the food you're eating, this is not like a once in a week or once in a month outing like it used to be when you were a kid, because you associate hotels and restaurants with that, since you've grown up. So it took a while, but yes, I learned the hard way that you need to kind of calibrate what you're eating, and even if it means just having salad at the salad bar after dinner because it's 2 in the morning, even though there's like a huge array of, or like a melange of dishes that you can stuff into your mouth, you try to avoid that because I mean, you are going to be waking up at like 4 in the morning to catch a flight the next day. So for me, that's how it worked. Like I realized that the heavier I ate at night, the more lazy I felt like the next day. So eating like lighter definitely help, or eating the right foods for that matter. Exercise wise, yes, I do exercise very regularly now because the pandemic has struck upon us, and I have an exercise bike at home. But that's something that you easily get at any gym when you're traveling. And also, I remember Adi and I, when we would travel, Adi's heavily into yoga, so he would be doing that. I remember even at NH7 just a few months, years back, sorry, months, just stuck in that phase when we were traveling in Shillong. And I remember I woke up and Adi was doing, Surya Namaskar stretches. I always carry this exercise resistance band with me that I carry. You can do like, floor exercises anywhere you want, even with like just a floor mat. So yes, I mean, if you are into that fitness aspect, it will definitely help you go a long way, because as a touring musician, it's not just the playing aspect. It's not just the aspect of keeping yourself in a good space with everybody, but physically you need to be in shape, because I know so many people who've not been able to travel or give up gigs because the back gave out, or they had knee issues, or I mean, various things come about because you are traveling. You have to take care of your body, so that's very, very important. And I'm so glad that you are like considering these things before getting on the road, because it's going to go a long way in keeping you on the road.
No, that's an excellent point because that's something that we try to get swayed by and not realize. Yes, Puru, go ahead. You're on mute. Can't hear you. No, you're not audible.
Oh, I think the mic's just getting connected or something.
No.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sweet. Hi, I really loved your session. It was really helpful.
Thanks
I just
so much.
had this really, I was like very curious about this one thing. So
Yeah.
when we are working with a band, which is like your own band, so like when I'm working with my own bandmates, and if I don't agree with a part, like they want me to play drums in a certain way, and so I'm a drummer. Sorry, I had to like say that.
No, of course.
Yeah, so I don't agree with some drum parts. So we can like discuss it with the bandmates and maybe do something else, and do your own thing, and maybe maybe come to a conclusion. But I've heard this from a lot of people. But like when you're doing sessions, you're not really allowed to like argue and stuff, and you're supposed to play what they ask you to play. So what do you do in these situations when you don't agree with the part which they want you to play, but like you just want to play your own thing, but I don't know, do you just play the thing which they want you
I
to?
mean, you have a drumstick in your hand, just throw it. I'm just joking. I mean, honestly, it's a session, as you rightly said. And, when it's a collaborative thing, when you work in a band, like there are parts I really think like a drummer too. I love what drummers come up with. And, the sense of rhythm really drives me as a composer. And I really look up to drummers when it comes to the composition aspect. So I like to work in a certain way, but there are places where you said that, like a composer may have had a certain idea. And I've witnessed so many people go through that, not just with drums, but many instruments. But if it's a session, then yeah, sadly you have to kind of follow the vision of the person who's, kind of the leader of that thing, and request them to maybe see it from your perspective. Be like, okay, let's try it your way. Of course, what you've got, because that's something that you have imagined it. That's how you envision the song. But once you're done, you can just be like, let's just try this part once, that the way I've written it. It's just the way you say it. It's not what you're saying. Also, that's a very important part of communicating and how you're putting your feelings across. You should be like, yeah, of course, let's try it your way. And I've seen this in many, many setups wherein, maybe, and that's kind of brought about that change, that the person heard it in a different context and it sounded much, much better. And sometimes I've noticed, like, say if it's like a 16 bar part, like, for the first 8 bars, if it's drums, the person would play the groove the way that, the person asked for it. And maybe the next 8 bars you can play it, in your own way, or just basically bring a little bit about that. So it's just, just the way you say it, I think makes all the difference. But essentially, yeah, if they're not happy with this thing, you just have to suck it up, because it's a session at the end of it. I've had that situation many, many times, so I totally relate to that.
Got it. Thanks.
Of course.
I think that's where somewhere, Puru, it will be. It's always useful to know when you're signing up for a project.
Yeah.
Why are you signing up for that project? If it is a way of just giving you that extra source of income, which is great. So then your purpose of, and you get to play. That's great. And and you've heard the music, because obviously you would know what you're going in for. They must have given, even if it is they're going to record for the first time, but they may have sent you rough patches or something to have an idea of, okay, what the sound is going to be like. So have a conscious set in your mind as to why are you signing up for this. If it is just because I want to build my repertoire of things that I've been doing, so then that this is where I'm going. I will try my luck. If it gets through, it's great, but I know where to draw the line, and why do I want to draw the line. At the end, and as Gaurav rightly said, at the end of the day, the project is of somebody else, and you've chosen to be a part of it. At the end of the day, even if they asked you, you decided to be there. If they selected you, that means you applied for it. So you know why you are signing up for it, and in what context. So somewhere, if that context is, because then there's the chances of having a miscommunication is low. Or else then you're going with warped ideas or expectation. Because that you signed up knowing very well that it's a project by someone with a very fixed idea, and I'm going there just to play the part that they want me to, because they know they like my groove and they exactly want me to play it this way, and that's what I'm going to do, and that's what they're paying me for. But if they're happy to ask you for something more, then you're right, and that's what you're going for. So that's where I think you need to be clear.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Anybody else has any question? We are shooting off our time. I think it's been a crazy conversation, great conversation. Is everybody able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I think my AirPods are giving up on me. Hang on, just a minute.
Can I add something?
Again.
Hi, Gaurav. I just wanted to, I didn't really have a question. I wanted to just say that it's, I've known you for so many years, and, it's just great how humble you are, despite playing with so many acts, and you're one of those serious, genuine musicians that I've seen out there. It's fantastic. I also really admire your work ethic. And what I liked the most about what you said today was the idea of finding your own substitute as a sessions artist. So it gives one, that space to take ownership of the space you are occupying, no matter which band it is. So you don't kind of take that for granted as well. And I really like that as an ethic, because then it opens up more avenues for one to think I can be a sessions artist, because then I have these things as well. So you like have one or two people in hand always who you can count on. So I really like that which you said today. It definitely opens up more avenues for me when I think about it.
Thank you so much, and you're so sweet to even say that. Even though we're family, you could have just texted me, but you chose to do this here.
No, I chose to come here because I definitely wanted to hear everything that you had to say.
That really means a lot. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks a lot, Gaurav. Thanks, Megha.
Kim is also a very wonderful vocalist.
Exactly.
And yeah, we should definitely go and check out her page on Instagram and her other YouTube channels.
In fact, the first time I met Kim was at GMI, and this is when I was playing with at the older GMI.
Yes,
And yeah, Lajpat Nagar, and I was just playing with Bandish. I just played with Bandish, and I just found out that like she was related to Kitty. It was just like crazy. And then obviously a few years later, I'm married to her sister. So yeah, it's a different thing altogether. But yeah, as you rightly said, like a fantastic singer, and been doing so many things herself. So it's incredible to see this.
Thank you so much. And I know I can call you anytime to ask, but really, I'm going to say this again that you are one of the few people out of everyone that I've played with, Omid, who has a fantastic work ethic. No, the young ones who are here, they should know.
Please let her speak.
No, I'm just joking.
It's important to have a good work ethic like Gaurav if you want to take up music as your first choice in a career. It's important to have that ethic. Welcome.
Thanks, Kimmy.
Yes. Thanks, Kim. Thanks for that. And I think that's an apt way to close this session. Once again, thank you so much, Gaurav, for coming here.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. Thank you so much. Yeah.
It was actually interesting and funny for me to do this on this forum, but it's so nice because actually sometimes we don't talk about these things. Generally, we kind of, assume it and are there, but it was really nice to reflect back on so many things that we have been and gone through together and seen you do. So all the best for all your projects, all your engagements, and we look forward to see you in campus, in person soon.
Very soon,
and
yes.
Everybody else, who I think almost everybody is a student. No, not all of them, but all those who are students at GMI, all the best for your next week. And I shall try catch you all separately at some point.
Good luck, guys.
It's just an exam, so don't stress. It's not the end of the world. All right. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. See you around. And thank you, everybody, once again.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Thanks,
Good luck for the
Gaurav.
coming week. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.